We need to talk about Andor episode 9. We're reaching a certain point now where it's crunch time for season 1, and with every episode that passes, the show is becoming more and more gripping. Settling for this one, people, as there's a few surprises in this episode that I don't think anyone was expecting. Let's break it down, piece this Andor-shaped puzzle together, and to finish off, I've got a killer theory on what we can expect to see in episode 10. We start off back on Ferrix during Dedra Meero's interrogation of Bix Caleen, probing her for information on her buyer Luthen, and also Cassian, with Dedra taking a particular interest in Luthen and Cassian's relationship to one another. What's strange here is that Bix is the only person to actually use the radio she uses when she contacts Luthen, and the owner of the radio is actually paid by someone, who I think is probably Luthen himself, to keep it open. If true, this just shows how deep Luthen was in recruiting Cassian to the cause, making it seem very strange that he's willing to kill him off after Aldhani so quickly. Wouldn't he prefer to find him first to see if he can be brought back on board? Or perhaps he knows by sending Val after him, he's sacrificing Val, but in return will learn of Cassian's location. We move to the Imperial prison and Cassian seems to be settling in well to his new role and job building parts for the Death Star. I think Cassian is largely just playing the game at this point, keeping his head down, blending in, just biding his time and waiting for the right opportunity. I don't think he has any intention of staying there the whole sentence or leaving once he's allowed to. The workers are in a competition with the other tables around them in which one can build the most parts, with the winning table getting rewarded with flavour in their next meal. The older guy at the table is struggling to keep up with demand, his hands fat enough. This is where Cassian thinks on his feet and gets him to swap places into a less demanding role. Inside and outside the table, Cassian is making the right moves to fit in. During Bix's interrogation, what I can only describe as an unhinged doctor begins to put Bix through a form of torture, using the sounds of dying alien children on a world the Empire took over, with the screams after repeat hearing mess with the listener's head so much they're effectively a shell of their former selves, quite similar to what we saw in Rogue One with Pakali. Switching back over to the prison, this is where we get our first confirmation on what Cassian's really up to. Cassian sees the guard briefly leave his station and takes the moment to go to the toilet, which catches the attention of a fellow prisoner. Inside the toilet, there's a large, loose panel, which Cassian takes off. Behind the panel, Cassian has stashed a knife-like cutting tool. He uses this to begin cutting one of the pipes located behind the loose panel before the tannoy announces the arrival of a new prisoner to their floor, replacing the one we saw fried last episode. Hurrying back to his table, Cassian discusses the security in place with the prisoner who watched him leave to the toilet. Cassian and this other prisoner have obviously been discussing the possibility of breaking out for a while, watching out for any weaknesses in the defence, such as the railings or anything that moves slightly not being hooked up to fry. Cassian notices the lack of guards used when bringing down a new prisoner, and the guards not wearing any fry-proof boots. He thinks this is the best opportunity they have at escaping. Bix has finished her first dose of the listening torture, and already she's completely out of it, barely responsive. Dedra's ice cold during this scene, playing the part of a great villain, repeatedly probing Bix for information, telling the other guy, the doctor, to not put the headphones away just yet, a tactic to warn Bix that there's plenty more where that came from if she doesn't cooperate. Now we move to what seems to be constantly a cool scene, and that is Mon Mothma addressing the Imperial Senate, which seems much more forward than the last time. Here she's bringing to light her concerns of the Empire's overreach. What's really good in this scene is that you can gauge her overall support for this statement by looking at the lights on the Senate pods. During her speech, a number of the lights go out, whilst you can hear things like "Long live the Empire" being shouted in the background. She doesn't exactly have the crowd at her feet here, but there is support for her. Some of the lights remain on, with cheers for what she's saying ringing around the place as well. Leaving the address, Mon Mothma learns her cousin has arrived, waiting to see her. As the prisoners are being transported back to the cells after the day shift, something's up. They're being held for an unusual amount of time, and a man using sign language to communicate with another section of the prison is learning something is wrong with level 2. Andy Serkis's character, he played Snoke in the sequels by the way, tries his best to keep order within the group. He's doing his best to keep his record clean. He holds a position of power over the other prisoners and doesn't want to risk anything that could jeopardise his sentence. He's almost done. The power cuts out briefly, which could mean they've simply reset the system, or having difficulties, maybe it's overloaded, or they could be under some kind of attack. Cassian's reaction here is very difficult to read. He's extremely interested in what's going on, but it could be for one of two reasons. The first being it's a potential vulnerability he can exploit. The second being he could be worried Luthen has learned of his whereabouts and someone's coming for him there. Keep this incident in your mind, as I have a really good theory on how important this is coming up in a while, and once you hear it, it makes complete sense in Cassian's ultimate goal for escaping. Back at Mothma's place, we finally get the question answered on what Val's role is within all of this, other than just being a rebel. She seems higher up than the other rebels she was fighting alongside in Aldhani, and it turns out she is Mothma's cousin. Mon, being a concerned cousin, questions Val on what Luthen actually has her doing. Seemingly unaware Val was involved in the attack on Aldhani, Val responds by pretending not to know who Luthen is. Isn't this a little bit back and forth at the start? It's mealtime. The inmates are in their cells eating real food, which is likely their reward for a day's work and coming first in the contest. A welcome change from the tube substance we've seen them consuming in the last episode. Cassian is probing Kino here, that's Andy Serkis's character, for more information on the number of guards stationed on each level of the prison, also asking him if he's ever thought about escaping. Kino refuses to answer any of the questions as mentioned earlier. He doesn't want to risk his sentence being extended. Cassian points out to him that no one within the Empire is secretly listening to their conversation. They don't care enough. All they need to do is routinely turn the floor on and make it electric to remind people who's in charge. I think once Kino comes to this realisation too, I think he'll tell Cassian what he knows and share information he once thought about when he wanted to escape, likely before he got his senior role within the section. Stick around for the end of the breakdown because the whole prison situation takes a huge swing in the other direction, so it makes sense to continue this part there. Back at the ISB, Dedra Meero is updating the others, informing them that Bix eventually succumbed to their tactics and gave them the information they wanted. Thanks to this information, they're beginning to link the incident on Ferrix with the attack on Aldhani, and more specifically Cassian's involvement in both of them. On the way to the next day shift, Cassian's incoming day shift briefly interacts with the departing night shift in the tunnel, where they pass each other. Learning the incident the night before with the delay and the power outage was a result of a whole floor being fried, 100 people dead. This really rattles Kino, who needs to be reminded by Cassian that the less they think you know, the better. We have another brief Cyril eating cereal moment. His mother is unhappy at how vacant he is back at home, acting more like a tenant. He tells her now he has a promotion, which delights her, telling him Uncle Harlow will be proud. I do wonder if we'll ever meet Uncle Harlow and learn what position he actually holds within the Empire. Okay, so it's not quite a dinner party, but we do get to witness breakfast at Perrin's, accompanied by Mon, their daughter, and cousin Val. We learn here that Tay Colmer, the Chandrilan banker, and Mothma used to date when they were younger. As the breakfast ends, Val asks if there's anything she can do to help Mon, who simply asks her to act like a spoilt rich girl, live that lifestyle for a little while, to remind the others who she really is, which is what Mothma is doing so well, hiding her true intentions. We get quite a weird moment outside the ISB as Cyril Khan has now finished his cereal and is actually waiting for Dedra outside. The thing is, this isn't a scheduled meet, and it comes to light he's actually become obsessed with her. Often outside the ISB trying to catch a glimpse of her, he puts his promotion solely down to Dedra and thanks her for it, when she responds by telling him she had nothing to do with it, she only had his record cleaned. Clearly freaked out by Cyril's actions, she then goes on to tell him that she could have him arrested for stalking her, and if he ever tries this again, she'll have him locked away somewhere on the outer rim. As we enter the ISB, Dedra is met with an excited officer who informs her they've captured a rebel pilot who turns out to be one of Anto Krieger's group. Dr. Gorse, the same doctor who aided in the interrogation of Bix, using the sound of alien children's deaths, was sent to interrogate and had the rebel pilot speaking almost immediately. Now back with Mon Mothma, and she's now talking to Tay Colmer, who's come to visit, about her finances, that her transactions are a problem, but that nothing's been picked up yet until they scan her accounts, which is inevitable. Tay's solution is to work with the supposed Chandrilan banker, who's actually a thug called Davos Cowden, whose relationships make him a good candidate to help Mon with her money problems. Mon initially refuses due to her role within the Senate and how that would look dealing with a known thug. Tay offers to keep looking for other options, but Mon realises time isn't really on her side here, and perhaps she and the rebellion can't afford to wait any longer. Inside the prison, we see the older gentleman struggling with his health yet again. This has been evident throughout the course of the episode, with it finally coming to a head on his way back to the cell, where he collapses. A medic is sent down to try and assist him, and the medic, it turns out, is actually a prisoner himself. The medic seems morally defeated at this point, saying that he can't actually save anyone, and here's the reason why, and it also ties in nicely to what we spoke about earlier with Cassian and Kino talking in of escape. It turns out a prisoner was released from floor 4 the other day, only to find himself accidentally enrolled on floor 2 the next day, back in as another prisoner. This doesn't seem accidental to me, and it didn't to floor 2 who were there to witness it. Upon learning what happened, which effectively means no one's getting out of there now, they're stuck in a loop. Once they're released, they'll be sent back in on another floor for further service. Floor 2 kicks up a fuss and they were all killed. This does seem counterproductive from the Empire, as trying to gain an extra man has resulted in 100 workers being killed. Although they're easily replaceable, as it's mentioned throughout the show, you can imagine it would be a pain to get a whole floor working as efficiently as it once was with all the new faces. It's this news that tips Kino over the edge. We've seen this coming with his responses towards Cassian softening as the episode progresses. As Cassian and Kino are ordered back to their cell by a guard, Cassian repeats the question he asked to Kino the other night whilst they were eating. How many guards on each level? This time though, rather than Kino not giving Cassian an answer, he replies, never more than 12, which now confirms that Kino is now well on board with Cassian's plan, and he's not the only one, as we already know about that other prisoner that Cassian was speaking to earlier at the start. So, with Kino now on board and the respect amongst the other prisoners that he has, I think he will be able to bring more on board with an escape plan, if not all the prisoners. We've already seen how the floors communicate with one another through sign language. Now, using that to get the word out, and perhaps the medical prisoner as well, as he obviously moves across the floors, I think they'll now plan a full-scale riot, with one big vulnerability that we've seen in this episode, the electric floors. It's ironic how the one thing that's keeping them in place could be the thing that sets them free. Shocking the whole of floor 2 for acting up knocked out the power temporarily in what seems like the entire prison. Now, if all the floors began to riot and the Empire tried shocking them all, that would easily blow the power of the whole thing, perhaps permanently, leaving the prisoners who massively outnumber the guards to take over and escape. Do you think that's the way the prisoners will eventually escape? For me, this was a good solid episode. Although we're building up towards the next big payoff, which is in the next episode, the episodes now have much higher stakes than previously, sucking us in and wanting more. Thanks for watching everyone, and may the force be with you.